Hello there. They call me Mr. E. Now, universal suffrage, the right to vote for all adult citizens, is a great thing, right? The intention is to have a democratic system that allows everyone to voice their opinion, an outlet to make a difference in the rules and decisions that govern our lives. Now, this is great in theory, but not as it seems. It was allowed to happen by a begrudged upper class and has since turned into nothing more than a veneer under the guise of participation. As the saying goes, if voting did anything, they'd make it illegal. So why do we love it so much? And why is it important?
My name is Mystery. For reasons unknown, I have been thrown back into the past almost 100 years. And this is my story.
Traditionally, upper and middle classes of society were afraid of universal suffrage for a number of reasons. The obvious, that the lower classes would band together and use democratic power to establish an egalitarian utopia, which we now know has definitely not happened. So beyond that, it had to do with elitism. The upper classes, including the intellectual classes of society, really believed that the common rabble didn't have the understanding of how society works or the education needed to have constructive democratic input or the ability to know what was best for them regarding their own governance. Simply, they didn't think average people were smart enough to know what was good for them and therefore couldn't be trusted. Now, continuing on with this line of thought though, what they really feared was not just stupid individual voters, but that the average people would band together to form a terror of the masses, trading elected representatives for an authoritarian regime that would use its popularity to create totalitarian and unfree society that would destroy individualism and liberty for the greater good. Really meaning destroying liberty and class power for the rich. And so universal suffrage was resisted for a long time in many countries that had removed absolute monarchy and instituted representative government. The reason I have doubts about universal suffrage is not in principle, but is in its effect. It has an incredible power to distract people and make them indifferent to politics. In a modern democracy, people think their political and social consciousness stops at the polls, meaning they will cast a vote every few years and outside of that have no real interest in political affairs. They just are fed updates via the media. And so they just let politicians and special interest groups run things until they start thinking about politics again a few weeks out before the next election. Before universal suffrage, do you know how people voted? And let the upper classes know if they were happy with decision making and government? They protested, rioted, staged mass strikes and overthrew unjust and horrible rulers. This was the democratic process. Now, it is extreme to have to wait for a situation to get so severe that enough people will physically rise up and challenge the system, but there was an organic element of check and balance in that, and it kept rulers and decision makers on their toes. In the 21st century, it's common sense to just vote them out or show them how you feel in the polls. But this is playing by the rules and playing within the system. It doesn't create systematic changes, and it doesn't scare rulers and decision makers into doing things that truly benefit people and communities. When suffrage did become a thing, there were a great many wins for average people through social democracy, parties that came from working class movements. Social democratic parties had so much power that they were able to rival and even take majorities in advanced countries. But modern democracy, as we've discussed in previous videos, is corrupting. And once you take leaders of working class movements and turn them into politicians, even social democratic ones, they become politicians. They start playing political games and want to stay in power and will trade solidarity, real struggles and improvements for political games and maneuvers. And this is exactly what happened throughout the mid to late 1800s. And so average people became disinterested in politics, skeptical, and began to hate politicians. And along came social movements that promised to change the game. They promised to do away with politics and career politicians. They promised to restore and improve the lives of working people, and they promised to restore the greatness of their nations. Riding on these waves and sentiments were demagogues like Hitler, Mussolini, and Stalin. People were angry that voting didn't help their daily lives as it promised, and they turned to saviors who promised that if you just gave them enough power, they would change the game and make it better for all citizens, not just the rich and the powerful. Those who would establish dictatorships and authoritarianism under the guise of collectivism. This is the terror of the masses that the ruling classes were worried about, and it came using their systems. Now, I'm not against universal suffrage and people's right to vote, but if you look at it in its context, it is very tokenistic at best, and it does little to affect governing or politics unless people are truly engaged in the workings of the system. The allure of universal suffrage repeatedly fails people. We have lost faith in politicians, and the troubles of the world make people turn to extreme measures, sacrificing democracy itself for a radical saviour that claims to have all the answers. Universal suffrage is not a silver bullet to social change, as it was promised or sold to people, and so we mustn't forget, nothing beats good old cultural movements, civil disobedience, and grassroots action. We just need to let go of the idea that voting is the only answer to our problems. Voting is not a strategy to gain political ends, but a political end in itself. Now, if you thought this was interesting, give it a like and share it with someone who needs to hear this. And please subscribe for more. There is much to learn about the revolution. Remember, I am, you are, we are a mystery.